The metal walls of Frontier Station Delta hummed with the constant vibration of life support systems as Jack Miller stepped off the transport ship. His boots made a soft clicking sound against the polished floor, and he adjusted the strap of his research bag on his shoulder. The young xenobiologist couldn't help but smile. This was his first real assignment after years of study on Earth. "Welcome to the edge of known space, Dr. Miller," said the stern-faced station officer who met him at the dock. Officer Tom had deep wrinkles around his eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. "I wish you were arriving at a better time." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Is something wrong?" "Follow me to the briefing room," Tom replied, already walking away. "There's a lot you need to know before you start your work here." They walked through curved corridors lined with view screens showing the purple-tinted planet below them. Jack had read about this world, designated as PX 2547, but nothing in his studies had prepared him for its alien beauty. Through gaps in the swirling clouds, he could see vast forests of silver-leaf trees stretching to the horizon. The briefing room was small, with just a round table and 4 chairs. A holographic display flickered in the center, showing a creature that made Jack lean forward in fascination. It moved like liquid shadow, with 6 powerful limbs and a sleek, armored body that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "This," Tom said gravely, "is why you're getting a special welcome briefing. We call them Shadow Claws. They're the reason we lost 3 research teams in the past month." Jack watched the hologram as the creature moved with impossible grace for its size. "They're beautiful," he whispered. "They're killers," Tom corrected sharply. "The most lethal predators we've ever encountered." The first team thought they were just animals. The second team thought they could defend themselves. The third, he shook his head. "We found nothing but scattered equipment." The door hissed open, and Station Commander Ann walked in. She was tall, with gray hair cut military short, and carried herself with the confidence of someone used to being obeyed. "Dr. Miller, I've read your file. Top of your class, specialized in predatory xenobiology. That's why we requested you. We need to understand these creatures, but from a safe distance." She tapped the table, and the hologram changed to show a map of research stations on the planet's surface. Several were marked with red X's. "These are the stations we've lost. Whatever these Shadow Claws are, they're smart. They cut power supplies, disabled security systems, and showed strategic thinking. But they're also incredibly aggressive. Any attempt at contact has ended in violence." Jack nodded, his mind already racing with possibilities. "Have we tried non-threatening approaches? Passive observation?" "The last team tried that," Tom said quietly. "They stayed in their reinforced shelter, just watching through cameras. The Shadow Claws dug under the foundation and collapsed the whole structure." Commander Ann leaned forward, her eyes intense. "So here are your orders, Dr. Miller. You will study them, but only from the safety of high-altitude drones and orbital scanners. Under no circumstances are you to attempt direct contact or surface landing without a full security team. Is that clear?" "Yes, Commander," Jack replied, but his eyes were drawn back to the hologram. The Shadow Claw moved with such precision, such purpose. There was intelligence in those movements, he was sure of it. "I mean it, Doctor." Ann's voice softened slightly. "I've lost too many good people already. Don't make me write another letter to someone's family." Jack nodded again, more seriously this time. But as they left the briefing room, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something important about these creatures. Years of studying predatory species had taught him that aggression always had a reason, a trigger. Understanding that was the key to everything. He just had to figure out what they were doing wrong, from a safe distance, of course. But sometimes, fate has other plans. 3 weeks of watching through drone cameras had taught Jack more about frustration than about Shadow Claws. The creatures were smart enough to avoid his surveillance most of the time. He needed better data, and he knew he wouldn't get it from orbit. "Just a quick surface run," he told the control room operator. "The scanner shows no Shadow Claws within 10 kilometers of the landing zone. I'll be back before sunset. The operator, Pete, looked unsure but checked his readings again. Commander Ann will have my head for this, but all right. 1 hour, no more. And take the armed drone escort. Jack's small research shuttle descended through the purple clouds. The silver forest looked even more beautiful up close, with tall trees that seemed to sing in the wind. His landing spot was a small clearing perfect for collecting soil samples. Everything went smoothly for the first 40 minutes. Jack worked quickly, gathering samples and taking readings. The armed drones circled overhead, their sensors sweeping the area constantly. He was just about to pack up when the first drop of rain hit his faceplate. "Control, we might have a problem," he said into his radio. The storm wasn't supposed to hit for hours. Static answered him. The rain grew heavier, and purple lightning split the sky. One by one, the escort drones lost power and fell from the sky. Jack ran for his shuttle, but the wind was so strong it nearly knocked him over. The shuttle's engines whined as he tried to take off. Through the windscreen, he saw a lightning bolt strike a nearby tree. The silver leaves exploded into sparks, and the massive trunk began to fall, directly toward his ship. Jack had just enough time to hit the emergency eject before the tree crushed his shuttle. He landed hard, rolling through the wet grass. When he stopped, he found himself staring at the wreckage of his only way back to the station. "Control, this is Miller. Does anyone copy?" His radio crackled uselessly. A low growl made him freeze. Slowly, Jack turned around. There, not 20 meters away, stood a shadow claw. It was even more impressive in person, nearly as tall as him at the shoulder, with smooth black armor plates that shed the rain like oil. Its 6 legs moved with cap-like grace as it approached. But something was wrong with its movement. The creature favored its right front leg, and Jack could see a deep gash in its armor there, glowing faintly with purple blood. All his training told him to run. The creature could cross the distance between them in seconds, but where would he run to? The shuttle was destroyed, the drones were down, and the storm made rescue impossible. The Shadow Claw took another step forward, then stumbled slightly on its injured leg. It made a sound, not a growl this time, but something almost like a whimper. Jack did something then that would either make history or end his life. He slowly reached into his sample kit and pulled out his medical scanner. "You're hurt," he said softly, knowing the creature couldn't understand his words, but hoping it might understand his tone. "I can help, if you let me." The Shadow Claw's head tilted, its 4 eyes studying him with an intelligence that seemed almost human. It took another step forward, then sat back on its haunches like a giant cat. The posture was clear, neither threatening nor retreating. "Okay," Jack whispered, his heart pounding but his hand steady as he opened his medical kit. "Okay, let's rewrite everything we think we know about you." The creature watched him with those bright eyes as he slowly approached. Up close, he could see patterns in its armor that looked almost like writing. The wound was worse than he'd thought. Something had torn through the natural armor plates, leaving the flesh beneath exposed to infection. As he began to clean the wound, using movements that were slow and careful, the Shadow Claw remained perfectly still. Only the slight twitching of its tail showed that it felt any pain at all. And that was how Jack Miller, against all orders and expectations, became the first human to make peaceful contact with the galaxy's deadliest predator. Not through force or fear, but through a simple act of kindness. 2 months had passed since the crash, and Jack's report to the station mentioned nothing about his close encounter with the Shadow Claw. Instead, he requested a small research outpost near the crash site, claiming he had found interesting plant samples there. Commander Ann was suspicious but approved it, as long as he maintained hourly radio contact. The Shadow Claw he had helped, whom he now called Ghost because of its ability to appear and disappear like a shadow, visited him regularly. Today, Jack sat in his observation blind, recording Ghost's behavior as the creature approached his outpost. Subject shows remarkable memory and problem-solving skills. He spoke quietly into his recorder. It remembers exactly where I store my medical supplies and can recognize different tools. Ghost was walking with perfect balance now, the leg wound fully healed. But instead of leaving after recovery, the creature had started bringing things to Jack. Today, it carried something in its mouth, a branch with strange blue fruits that Jack had never seen before. "This is the fourth type of plant Ghost has brought me," Jack noted. "Each one has turned out to be either medicinal or edible. It's not just random. Ghost is teaching me about the planet." The creature placed the branch carefully by the outpost's door, then sat back on its haunches. Its 4 eyes blinked in sequence, something Jack had learned was a sign of friendly intention. Jack emerged from his blind, and Ghost's tail swished in what he now recognized as happiness. "Thank you," he said, picking up the branch. "Let me guess, this one's good for something too." Ghost made a clicking sound and pointed with one clawed limb toward Jack's water purifier, which had been struggling with the local minerals. Jack raised his eyebrows. "For cleaning water? You understood that was a problem." The creature's armor plates rippled in a way that Jack had started to associate with satisfaction. He quickly tested the fruit in his analyzer. Sure enough, it contained natural compounds that could filter out the harmful minerals. "You're not just smart," Jack said, shaking his head in amazement. "You're a teacher." Ghost suddenly tensed, head turning toward the forest. 3 more shadow claws emerged from the trees, moving with fluid grace. Jack's heart raced, but he forced himself to remain still. Ghost had never brought others before. The new shadow claws approached cautiously. One was larger than Ghost, with battle scars on its armor. Another carried something that made Jack's jaw drop. It was holding a piece of broken machinery from one of the destroyed research stations. The largest shadow claw placed the machinery on the ground and stepped back. Jack approached slowly and examined it. The power cell had been carefully removed and set aside, preventing any possibility of explosion. This wasn't the work of mindless killers. This was deliberate and thoughtful. "You were trying to make it safe," Jack whispered. "All those attacks. You were protecting yourselves from what you thought were weapons." Ghost made a low humming sound and touched the machinery with one claw, then pointed to the sky. The message was clear. They recognized the connection between the stations and the humans above. Jack took out his tablet and pulled up images of the station. Ghost's companions showed immediate interest, moving closer to study the pictures. Their armor plates shifted in complex patterns, and they made soft clicking sounds to each other. "They have their own language," Jack recorded, trying to keep his voice steady despite his excitement. "Not just simple signals, but actual communication, and they recognize symbolic representation. They understand that images can stand for real things." One of the smaller shadow claws approached Jack's medical kit and gently touched it, then touched its own healed leg. Another pointed to its eyes, then to Jack's camera. "You want to learn about us too," Jack realized. "Ghost didn't just bring you here to show me something. This is a cultural exchange." As if confirming his words, Ghost picked up a small stone and began scratching marks in the dirt. Not random scratches, but deliberate patterns similar to the ones on their armor. Jack quickly started recording everything with trembling hands. He knew he would have to tell the station eventually, but first he needed to understand more. These weren't the mindless killers everyone feared. They were an intelligent species reaching out in the only way they knew how, trying to bridge the gap between two very different worlds. Jack was recording the Shadow Claw's written language patterns when his radio crackled to life. Dr. Miller returned to the station immediately. Commander N's voice was tight with urgency. "This is not a request." He looked at Ghost, who had been helping him understand their marking system. "I have to go," he said, pointing upward. Ghost's armor plates rippled with what Jack now knew was concern. The station's docking bay was unusually busy when Jack arrived. A massive military vessel had docked, its black hull decorated with the insignia of the Galactic Defense Force. Armed soldiers moved through the corridors, carrying weapons he had never seen before. Commander Ann waited for him in the briefing room, along with a tall military officer whose uniform was covered in medals. "Dr. Miller," Ann said, her face grim, "this is General Reed of the Defense Force. He's here about the Shadow Claw situation." "Situation?" Jack asked, his stomach tightening. The general activated a holographic display showing thermal images of the Shadow Claw territory. 3 days ago, another research station in the Beta sector was destroyed. 2 dead, 3 missing. The Galactic Council has made its decision. The Shadow Claws are too dangerous to be allowed to exist. Jack's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "We're going to eliminate the threat," General Reed said calmly. "Our new plasma weapons can pierce their armor. The operation begins tomorrow at dawn." "You can't." Jack stood up so quickly his chair fell backward. "They're intelligent. They have language, culture, technology. They're killers, Doctor," Reed cut him off. "We have 15 documented attacks. 47 deaths. The Council's decision is final. Those attacks were defensive. They thought our stations were weapons. If you'd just let me show you." "Stand down, Doctor," Commander Ann warned. "The General has full authority here." Jack looked between them, his mind racing. "At least let me show you my research. I've made peaceful contact." The room went silent. General Reed's eyes narrowed. "You what?" Commander Ann put her head in her hands. "Miller, tell me you didn't." "I can prove they're peaceful if we approach them right," Jack insisted. "I've been working with them for months. They're trying to communicate with us." "You've been in direct contact with these creatures for months." Reed's voice was dangerously quiet. "That's a direct violation of protocol. Commander, place Dr. Miller under arrest. He's clearly been compromised." 2 soldiers moved toward Jack, but he was already backing toward the door. "You're making a terrible mistake. They're not what you think they are. This is exactly why the operation is necessary," Reed told Ann. "If they can compromise one of our best scientists." Jack ran. He knew the station's layout better than the visiting soldiers, and he managed to reach the emergency shuttle bay before the alarm even sounded. His hand shook as he initiated the launch sequence. "Miller, shut down that shuttle immediately." Ann's voice came through the speaker. "I'm sorry," he replied, "but I can't let you kill an innocent species." The shuttle shot out of the bay just as the security doors began to close. Jack piloted it down through the atmosphere, his mind focused on one thing. He had to warn Ghost and the others. Warning lights flashed on his console. 2 military ships were following him. They were faster, better armed. He wouldn't have much time. Jack pushed the shuttle's engines to their limit, heading for the Silver Forest. He activated his emergency beacon, the one Ghost had learned to recognize as his signal. "Please be there," he whispered. "Please understand." A plasma burst from one of the pursuing ships grazed his shuttle's wing. Jack gritted his teeth and dove lower, skimming the treetops. He just needed a few more minutes, just enough time to land and warn them. Behind him, the military ships charged their weapons. Below, shadows moved through the Silver Forest, racing toward his signal. It would be a race between trust and destruction, between understanding and fear. And Jack could only pray he would be fast enough. Jack's shuttle crashed through the trees, smoke trailing from its damaged wing. He had only seconds before the military ships would be in firing range. As he desperately looked for a landing spot, dark shapes moved through the forest below. Dozens of Shadow Claws, racing alongside his ship. Ghost appeared at their head, leading them to a hidden clearing Jack had never seen before. He aimed the shuttle toward it, fighting the controls as the engines died. The landing was hard, but he had no time to worry about bruises. He grabbed his research tablet and stumbled out of the ship just as Ghost reached him. Behind him, the military vessels appeared over the trees, weapons glowing with charged plasma. But before they could fire, something extraordinary happened. The Shadow Claws moved with incredible coordination, their armor plates shifting to reflect the purple sunlight in complex patterns. The silver leaves of the forest trees began to respond, bending and shifting to create a canopy so dense the ship's sensors couldn't penetrate it. "They're protecting me," Jack whispered in amazement, recording everything on his tablet. His radio crackled. "Dr. Miller," Commander Ann's voice came through. "You have 10 minutes to surrender before we begin our attack." Ghost looked at Jack, then touched his radio with one claw before pointing to the tablet. Jack understood immediately. Ghost wanted to show something to the people above. "Commander," Jack replied, "I'm sending you a live feed. Please, just watch for 5 minutes. That's all I ask." He activated his tablet's camera as Ghost walked to the center of the clearing. The other Shadow Claws formed a circle, and to Jack's astonishment, they began to move in perfect synchronization. Their armor plates shifted colors and patterns, creating complex symbols in the air. The same symbols Jack had been studying in their written language. "Are you seeing this?" Jack asked over the radio. "They're showing us their writing system. This isn't random movement. It's deliberate communication." Ghost approached Jack's crashed shuttle and carefully began repairing the damaged wing, using techniques that showed clear understanding of the technology. Other Shadow Claws brought pieces of machinery they had collected from the research stations, demonstrating how they had disassembled them safely rather than destroying them. "They've been studying us," Jack explained, his voice growing stronger. "Just as we studied them. They removed power cells from our stations because they recognized them as dangerous, not out of aggression." There was a long silence on the radio. Finally, General Reed's voice came through. "Impressive theatrics, Doctor, but this doesn't erase their history of violence." Ghost seemed to understand the tension in Reed's voice. It walked to Jack's medical kit, pulled out a bandage, and then showed its own healed leg to the camera. Then it pointed to the military ships and made a clear stop gesture with its front limb. "Look at that," Jack said. "They understand the concept of healing versus harm. They're asking us to stop the violence." "Miller," Commander Ann's voice was thoughtful now, "can you prove they won't attack unless threatened?" In response, Ghost did something incredible. It walked to the closest military ship, now landed at the clearing's edge, and deliberately laid down its armored head beneath the ship's main gun. The message was clear. It was offering trust. The other Shadow Claws remained still, watching. They could have attacked. The ship was vulnerable on the ground. Instead, they waited. "My God," Anne whispered. "General, are you seeing this?" "Seeing, Commander." Still not entirely believing. Jack stepped forward, standing beside Ghost. "These aren't mindless killers, General. They're a species reaching out to us, trying to find a way to communicate. Everything in my research proves it. The real question is, are we intelligent enough to listen?" The clearing fell silent except for the soft humming of ship engines and the whisper of silver leaves. In that moment, the fate of two species hung in the balance, waiting to see which would prove stronger, fear or understanding. A temporary base camp now stood in the clearing where Jack's shuttle had crashed 2 weeks ago. The military ships had been replaced by research vessels, and scientists from various species walked carefully among the Shadow Claws, learning to understand their complex language of movement and light. Jack sat with Ghost under the silver trees, teaching a group of xenolinguists the basic patterns of Shadow Claw communication. His tablet displayed a growing dictionary of their symbols and gestures. The key was understanding that they communicate through 3 methods at once. Jack explained to his fascinated audience: physical gestures, armor plate patterns, and reflected light. It's like a 3-dimensional language. Ghost demonstrated by shifting its armor plates into a complex pattern while moving its limbs in specific ways. The silver leaves above them reflected the light in response, creating dancing shadows that formed part of the message. "That pattern means peaceful learning," Jack translated. "They've created new symbols just to talk with us. They're adapting their language to make it easier for humans to understand." Commander Ann approached the group, looking much more relaxed than she had in weeks. "Dr. Miller, the council representatives will be arriving tomorrow. Are you and your friend ready?" Jack looked at Ghost, who made the gesture for ready and confident simultaneously. "We're prepared," he answered. Ghost understands how important this meeting is. Later that evening, Jack worked in his new research station, a proper building this time, with large windows so the shadow claws wouldn't feel trapped inside. Ghost helped him organize his presentation for the council, using its claws with surprising delicacy to arrange holographic displays. "Look at this," Jack told Pete, who was helping with the technical setup. 3 weeks ago, Ghost couldn't use our touch screens. Now it can operate complex holographic controls. Their learning speed is incredible." Pete shook his head in amazement. "Hard to believe we almost went to war with them. General Reed came by earlier. He actually apologized to them. Never thought I'd see that." Ghost made a sound that Jack had learned to recognize as laughter. The creature had developed a keen understanding of human emotions and often seemed amused by their surprise as Shadowclaw intelligence. A young Shadowclaw, one Jack had nicknamed Scout, rushed into the station, its armor plates glowing with excitement. It made a series of quick gestures that had Jack grabbing his tablet to record. "They found something," he translated for Pete. "In the deeper forest. They want to show us." Following Scout, they traveled through the silver forest until they reached a clearing Jack had never seen before. There, carved into a massive rock face, were ancient markings, the early written language of the Shadowclaws. "This is incredible," Jack breathed, scanning the wall with his equipment. "This proves they had written communication long before we arrived, maybe even before they developed their light reflection language." Ghost touched one of the carvings, then made a series of gestures that took Jack a moment to translate. When he did, he laughed out loud. "What did it say?" Pete asked. "It said, humans are slow learners, but they get there eventually." Jack grinned at Ghost. "They've developed a sense of humor about us." Back at the base camp that night, Jack updated his research logs. Around him, humans and Shadowclaws worked together, learning from each other. A group of engineers was studying the Shadowclaw's ability to manipulate light, while the creatures themselves seemed fascinated by human technology. "We almost lost this," he said quietly to Ghost, who sat nearby, watching the stars. "We almost let fear destroy any chance of understanding you." Ghost's response was to draw a symbol in the dirt, one Jack had never seen before. When he asked about its meaning, Ghost pointed first to the humans and Shadowclaws working together, then to the stars above. The message was clear. This was just the beginning. 1 year after Jack's first meeting with Ghost, the Silver Forest had changed dramatically. The Joint Human Shadowclaw Research Center stood where the temporary camp had once been, its architecture blending human technology with Shadowclaw light manipulation abilities. The building itself seemed to glow from within, its walls partially transparent when needed, completely solid when privacy was required. Jack stood before the Galactic Council's main chamber, Ghost at his side, presenting their latest findings. The room was packed with representatives from 100 different species, all eager to learn about the successful integration of what they had once considered the galaxy's most dangerous predators. "The Shadowclaw language translation project is now complete," Jack announced, as Ghost demonstrated by creating complex light patterns that the room's computers translated instantly into multiple languages. "But that's just the beginning of what we've learned from each other." He gestured to a series of holographic displays showing new technologies. "The Shadowclaw's understanding of light manipulation has revolutionized our stealth technology. Meanwhile, they've adapted our medical knowledge to help heal their injured more effectively." A council member raised a hand. "And there have been no more violent incidents." Ghost stepped forward and activated its own presentation device, something that would have seemed impossible a year ago. The creature's gestures were confident as it showed statistics proving that not a single aggressive encounter had occurred since the cultural exchange program began. In fact, Jack added, The Shadow Claws have helped us understand other predator species we once feared. He brought up images of 3 other worlds where similar programs had been started. By using the Shadow Claws methods of initial contact, we've established peaceful communication with species we thought were just aggressive animals. After the presentation, Jack and Ghost walked through the Council Station's observation deck. Through the huge windows, they could see their planet below, the silver forests gleaming in the purple sunlight. Several transport ships were heading down to the surface, carrying new researchers and diplomats eager to learn from the Shadow Claws. "Remember when you first fixed my leg?" Ghost communicated through their now-perfected translation system. "I thought you were either very brave or very foolish." Jack laughed. "Probably a bit of both." What did the other Shadow Claws think? They thought I was crazy to trust a human. Ghost's armor plates rippled with amusement. "Now they say I was wise beyond my years." A group of young Shadow Claws passed by, escorting alien scientists. One of them was Scout, now a full instructor in cross-species communication. The progress they had made still amazed Jack every day. His tablet beeped with a message from Commander Ann. "New situation on Rigel 9. Another dangerous species. Council requests you and Ghost as consultants." Ghost read the message and made the gesture for excitement and ready for adventure combined. Jack had learned that the Shadow Claws loved nothing more than solving new puzzles, meeting new species, finding ways to bridge seemingly impossible gaps. "Want to help make some more history?" he asked his friend. Ghost's response was to create a new light pattern on the wall, a symbol that combined the Shadow Claw signs for journey, friendship, and discovery. As they headed toward their ship, Jack thought about how much had changed because one human and one Shadow Claw had chosen to trust rather than fear. Now, across the galaxy, other species were learning the same lesson: that understanding was stronger than fear, that differences could become strengths, and that even the most dangerous-seeming creature might turn out to be your closest ally. "Ready for our next adventure?" he asked Ghost. The Shadow Claw's answer was simple but perfect. It created the symbol for family, the highest form of trust in their culture, and then pointed to the stars. Together, human and Shadow Claw walked toward their ship, ready to show the galaxy that friendship could bridge any gap, overcome any fear, and open doors to possibilities no one had imagined before. The silver forests of their home world shimmered below, a constant reminder that sometimes the most beautiful things in life come from taking a chance on trust. And somewhere in those forests, new friendships were being formed, new understandings were being reached, and the future was growing brighter with each passing day.